Welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast, hosted by Dave Roberts. Humanity possesses a unique skill, the ability to pass knowledge from one generation to the next. This podcast embraces that ability, offering learning opportunities through conversations with extraordinary guests. Dave aims to leave a positive mark on individuals around the world. So before you dive into today's episode, please share this podcast with your network, including friends, family, and colleagues. And please consider leaving a rating or review. Your support makes all the difference.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, and today it is my pleasure to have as my guest Jaime Townzen. Jaime is a Southern California-based writer and professional artist whose watercolor paintings have earned international recognition. Her essays and microfiction have been published in Light Magazine and Fairfield Scribes. Jaime's debut novel, Absorbed, was released in early 2025. When Jaime's not in her studio, she can be found at the beach with her family and their dogs, or listening to live music. All of those sound really good, and I won't be going to the beach today, Jaime, because where I am in upstate New York, it's snowing, and snowing. But with that, welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast. I've been looking forward to our conversation for quite a while now.
Thanks so much, Dave. I've been looking forward to it too. And here in Southern California in the winter, we don't spend that much time at the beach, even though we get a lot of sunshine. It gets pretty windy and we've had a lot of rain over the holidays. I don't anticipate listening to live music much right now either, with 7 inches of rain expected in the next couple of days, but hopefully soon.
Well, hopefully you don't get this, deluged with floods and you stay safe and warm where you are. So, But anyway, we got to give a shout out. I believe you were introduced to me by Candace Snyder. And
Yes.
I think, Candace, you were on her Passion, Purpose, and Possibilities podcast. She's a great person, great podcast host, has a great heart. She introduced us, and I know we had a really good pre-call and introductory chat, and we find ourselves here today doing a podcast episode.
Yeah, I'm so grateful that Candace did introduce us. She is a wonderful person, and I love talking to her about my journey through coming back to art and writing and really being a lifelong student of passionate pursuits. So, yeah.
And we're going to get into all of that right now. So my first question for you is tell our listeners about the experiences that have shaped your current life path and your life passions today.
Well, that's a big question. I would say that the biggest experiences that led me to where I am right now in life are when I was married for about 5 years. I had built a pretty substantial career and I stepped away from it to become a stay-at-home mom, as many women who are able to might choose to do. I thought that that was the right choice. I'm still glad that I made that choice, but that I would come back to working when my kids were both in school full time. Unfortunately, at that point, when my youngest child was in kindergarten, we started losing a lot of loved ones. For the 6 years between 2014 and 2020, we lost 8 loved ones, including my father-in-law, my biological father, my stepfather, my stepsister. And it was just a really hard time for our family. So even though I had accepted a position and was going back to work full time in the fall of 2014, with what was happening with people getting terminal illnesses and people being hospitalized for long periods of time, I ended up not working and helping my extended family for those 6 years. And then in 2020, the pandemic hit and the whole world stopped. And I had spent those 6 years pouring out of myself to these people I love and losing them and so much heartache. And then also caring for my young children. And when everything stopped in 2020, I was full of anxiety and grief. And no matter how many sessions I did with a therapist or how many walks I took with my dogs, I just had this hum about me of stress, really. And I decided in July of 2020 that something needed to change. And while doom scrolling, as many of us during that period of time did, I kept coming across this ad for a watercolor tutorials that were free available on YouTube, and then you could buy kits and things. The company was Let's Make Art. And I decided in July of 2020 to try watercolor, and it truly transformed my life. This one little lesson that I sat down first with my, at the time, 9-year-old daughter. I sat down and I felt that my focus on something beautiful and my attention and my breathing, everything shifted to just this activity that had no purpose to anybody else but myself. And it calmed me from the inside out, and it brought me so much joy that from July of 2020 until January of 2021, I started painting more and more and more until I was painting every single day. And it started really affecting my brain and how my brain was working. I started wanting to learn more about the techniques and learn more about the papers and the tools. And then as I was getting more talented, I was getting more attention for my art. I started also wanting to go back and write again for the first time and just be creative in so many different ways. And so that led to me in 2021 going back to get my master's in writing. And in 2022, the fall of 2022, my thesis project was doing the first 10,000 words of what eventually became my first published novel. And I really take it all back to that first opportunity, I would say, that I chose to leap on, to sit down and be creative in a way that served no other purpose than for me, just for my own enjoyment.
Well, for a lot of people, Jamie, traditional talk therapy doesn't cut it. And particularly with the number of significant losses you had in a short period of time. You're talking about, parents, a step sibling, then COVID hit, which had its own unique circumstances with grief. And we became, I think, all more tethered to the reality of death by just the number of individuals who died that were published daily by the news, or people that we knew either superficially or just because we were part of a community. So all of that, I would imagine for anybody, and I imagine it had to be overwhelming dealing with all of that grief. And talk therapy, for a lot of people, doesn't cut it because they tend to resonate with different modalities of healing. And for you, obviously, it was a creative art. So it sounded like that watercolor painting not only grounded you, but like you said, it just had marvelous effect on your parasympathetic nervous system, just reducing stress, having a calming effect, and also probably got you out of your head enough where you had to really focus on creating something that would be kind of your signature, your statement, or any piece of work that you were creating at the time was going to be your signature statement in terms of how you were feeling at that particular moment. So,
Yeah, I agree completely. I think you're absolutely right. I did have a wonderful therapist, and we did a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy. We did EMDR, but there was something specific about the artwork itself, the attention, as you said, getting out of my head and really just focusing on something that wasn't life or death. I mean, honestly, that I think is what it was. I focused on something pretty that didn't matter. It was very inconsequential. And sometimes I think we need to give ourselves permission to do that, to be creative, to focus on whether it's taking out our phone or a camera to take a picture of a sunset. You are taking the time to focus on something that really is not life or death. The world is going to keep moving whether you pay attention to that sunset or not, but taking the time to appreciate it actually changes you from the inside out. It changes your perspective and the way that you're seeing the world in that moment.
well, the other thing, I think the creative arts is a great outlet to just pour all of your emotions, all of your feelings, into whether it's art, whether it's music. I mean, some of my favorite musicians are the ones that have had, the most significant life challenges. You can see that come out in their music. You can see that come out in their lyrics. And to me, that's more meaningful because there's a part of them that they're putting into their music, and there's always a part of them that you can identify with because regardless of fame, regardless of notoriety, we've probably aligned on the fact that we've experienced the same or similar challenges.
Absolutely. I love music for the exact same reason. And we could go down a whole rabbit hole that I don't want to go down, but and why I believe that the true artistic endeavors in this world can't be taken over by a machine because you have to have that lived experience. It's the bittersweetness of every moment of life that nothing is all roses or all flooding. Like everything is nuanced, and to be a human and live life and share that through your art is what speaks to other people who appreciate it.
Absolutely. And the cool thing about art is that everybody can have their own unique interpretation of art, regardless of what your artist statement is on that particular piece. But the bottom line is that interpretation works for them. And I think what we can do through art is build a whole community of individuals who resonate with the same piece of art, but for different reasons. And it brings people from different perspectives, different backgrounds together, talking about something that they have in common.
Absolutely. I agree.
So you mentioned your book. Let's go there.
Yes.
Go there for a minute. Tell our audience about your recently published book. The title is Absorbed. What inspired you to write it? What do you want readers to take away from it?
So absorbed, as you mentioned, like we pour our feelings and our experiences into our artwork. And while I enjoy doing that in the medium of watercolor, for me, my whole life, words on a page have really been how I get my thoughts, my deepest feelings, my biggest fears expressed. And when I decided to write Absorbed, I was actually sitting at the funeral of my grandmother in 2022. And I knew that life ahead of me in those next few weeks was going to be crazy busy. And I needed to write about things that I really understood well, but also things that are almost always very convoluted and complex, because that's what makes a great book, right? Absorbed is a story of a teenage girl, and she's 17 and she's going into her senior year of high school, and she's experimenting with her sexuality, with alcohol and drugs. She's got her first summer job, and all of those things were familiar to me, having gone through that season of life myself. But I also had teenage girls at the time that I started that book. So I was surrounded by teenage girls and all of the insecurities and false identities that they put on at any given moment. And so I knew that it was a world I could really live in and understand and really build out very well because of that. But the unique part of the story is that it's set in the 90s, and I did that very intentionally. I really wanted to include the pop culture of the 90s. It was so instrumental in my growing up. I loved it. A lot of Gen X and older millennial parents can really identify with a lot of the music and films and television that are mentioned in the book. Some people even refer to the book as being kind of like Baywatch meets Clueless at the community pool. And so that was really fun to incorporate all those details, but I intentionally did that because I wanted it to be a bridge between the parents today that are those Gen X and older millennial parents with their teenage daughters now, and to show them that even though we can remove the internet and the cell phones from the story by setting it in the 90s, there's not a lot of difference in what girls went through then and what girls go through now. And I hoped that it would open up some dialogues about things like consent, about things like experimenting in safe and unsafe environments. And also it really open up the opportunity for moms, parents today to be more empathetic to their teenagers, because they could see themselves again right back there. And in the different book clubs that have invited me to participate, I have heard a lot of that feedback, like, wow, I hadn't thought about how similar those situations were to what my kids are going through, because I'm always thinking of them living in a digital world. But none of us really live exclusively in a digital world. These kids are facing the same challenges we did back then. And the boy moms in particular have really appreciated the nuance of what Stacy's first sexual encounter looks like, because what it really poses the question of is, not saying no is still not saying yes, and how the two people involved in that situation can walk away with very different perspectives on what their sexual encounter was like. And so those moms were really grateful to read that in the book and say, now I want to have my son read this, or at least talk to him about this scene, because it made me really aware of how they could both be coming at the same situation with such different ideas of how it's going and what is supposed to happen or not happen. So
Yeah, that sounds like you've got quite a few categories that you're dealing with at once. All taboo topics too, by the way. I tell my students in my death, dying, and bereavement class, there's two things that we don't talk about in this society very, very openly. One is death. As far as I know, people are still dying every day. And the second is sex. And as far as I know, people are still having sex every day. But
yep.
these are topics that don't get addressed along with drug use. I mean, the issues that teenagers had in the 90s and the teenagers have now are not different. It's the same challenges. We're just living in a more technologically advanced and digital world where when I was a teenager, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have 24-hour news. We didn't have
Right.
technology. I registered for my college classes. I had the triplicate forms. I filled them out, and
Yeah.
that's how I registered. So, but the challenges that our young adults are facing today are much different than what we faced in the
Right.
90s or before. The other thing, we were mentioning the 90s, of course, I was thinking of the grunge rock scene. I was thinking of
Absolutely.
the Seattle scene. I was thinking of Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains. I mean, that whole Eddie Vedder, Chris Cornell. I was thinking of that scene, and obviously Nirvana with Kurt Cobain. That's where my head went when you mentioned music. I was thinking, of that particular era in our history of music as well, too. So thank you for sparking some nostalgia in me.
Oh, the book goes into grunge a little bit. She definitely listens to a little bit of grunge. There's a lot of the grunge influenced clothing, of course, with ripped jeans and flannels and band t-shirts and everything. But she's also very influenced by the Southern California punk scene. It's more pop punk with No Doubt and the band like Sublime and things like that. So there's all that music and the films that were coming out. It takes place in the summer of 1996 when Independence Day came out, and it was such a huge movie. And when those blockbusters, my own kids and nieces and nephews have told me that they really love reading that scene about people lining up around the block just to buy their tickets and then sitting there for hours because you couldn't buy a seat. You had to get in line and you got first pick once you got inside the theater. And that's just so foreign to so many of these kids. But that was such an integral part of my childhood was if you wanted to see a movie when it came out, those blockbuster hits were going to take some commitment of hours to go and see them. And same thing with getting concert tickets. We had to stand in line outside of Tower Records and get those tickets first if we wanted to ever go. So
Yeah, I remember one of the concerts I saw this was back in the 80s when I first started working, was the Cars. The Cars had come into the Utica
yes.
Memorial Auditorium, and I was a big fan, particularly of their first album, which I thought was an act of creative genius on their part. But to make a long story short, I had to stand in line to get tickets, and I begged my boss. I said, "Look, I got to take an early lunch and a later lunch so I can get these." But he was a
Uh-huh.
music aficionado himself, so he was good with that. But yeah, we could go down another rabbit hole just talking about music because music has been an integral part of my life and my journey and has really helped me through some really tough times in my life. But that's another form of creative expression in addition to any form of art.
Absolutely. Same thing here. And the way that music has helped me heal and helped me just process, even with the multiple funerals that we had. You end up, one funeral was during COVID. And so everything was online, and you have to curate some sort of online experience. And same thing if you're in a church. And so the music that I would choose to represent these individuals and my connection to them and other people's connection to them was so, I think, central to my healing journey in accepting that loss and also continuing to live without them and connect with them through those songs. There's so many ways that music has played such an important role in my life, but you're right. Healing and grieving, it's so integrally tied to the music for me as well.
Tell us about your process for creating a new painting. Take my audience through from the time that you have a concept of what you want to paint to the actual creation of that painting?
Oh, so I think the thing that I love about painting is the actual act of that spark inside. I think we refer to it as being our heart because it's that something in your chest that just sort of leaps a little bit and you find the smile on your face. You're like, oh, that's beautiful, or oh, that's so interesting. I can't wait to see what that looks like on the page. And so, an example of this, I have always wanted to go to Ireland. It's a dream of mine. I have yet to go to Ireland, but a girlfriend of mine spent about 2 weeks in Ireland this summer. And so, as I was looking at her pictures, there was a picture from Galway, and it was just this beautiful water scene and the houses behind it. And it just was so inspiring to me. And I immediately wanted to turn on Galway Girl and listen to some Dropkick Murphys and some different Irish music that I love. And so that's what I do. I did like flogging Molly in the background. I get my paper out and I start sketching, and I want to see it just in pencil form first. And then I tape my page down and I literally have the music going and I am in my own little world recreating it with a brush and water and seeing how I can introduce light and how I can use shadow to really create form and depth. It's a really magical experience for me. And for that reason, I am very, very protective of my watercolor time. I do share watercolors that I create through prints or through note cards. I like to give watercolors as gifts, but I almost never allow my time to be commissioned for watercolor because when I find that I'm creating something that somebody else wants, it's an entirely different experience for me. So I get such release and joy in how I can sit down and put a brush to paper and bring something to life that I was inspired by. And yet, when I do it for somebody else, it's not the same experience. I'm not as inspired. So the one exception from that, I do enjoy painting animals because I think animals have such fun features and there's so much personality that you can get about them. So the one thing I do is I donate artwork for auctions every once in a while, and it's pet portraits. I will donate a couple of pet portraits and people will bid on them, and then I can paint their pets for them if they win the auction. And I do enjoy doing that because I love animals so much. But I think if I didn't love animals so much, I probably wouldn't even offer that up. It's an entirely different thing if you don't get that spark, that initial spark to sit down and want to spend an hour doing something. So, or several hours, and depending on the painting.
Yeah, because one of the things I noticed when I was browsing through your galleries, there's a lot of paintings that you've created that depict elements of nature, flowers, trees, animals. Now, you've talked about what draws you to animals as an animal lover yourself and, just what they represent. What about the other elements of nature? What draws you to paint those specific elements?
I think what I love about nature in particular, I'm really drawn to flowers. I'm really drawn to the ocean and the beach. I happen to live in a beach community. Palm trees in particular, for example, they're a very good example of what I'm drawn to in that in your brain, when you imagine a palm tree, you imagine like this long brown trunk and these bright green big leaves. Well, those leaves have patterns to them in the way that they come out of that trunk. And there's beauty in the roughness of that trunk. When you look at a palm tree in the middle of the day, the bottom side of it looks black and the top side of it looks white. And it almost never looks green at all, actually, in the middle of the day. And so those nuances, like the rose behind me that you can see, like the nuances of the petals that are twisted and the petals that are going outward, and where some of them look white and some of them look, almost purple in the center. I'm really just drawn to how I can use one color to create so many shades, or the way that a raindrop, that one's covered in thousands of raindrops, have the way that like dewdrops can each be uniquely shaped and have shadows. And I'm really drawn to all of those little details So when I'm on a walk with my dogs, I always have my phone and I'm taking pictures of a spider web or a beautiful flower or even a flower that's about to completely fall apart and it's as bloomed as it can possibly be. It's so beautiful with like a bee that's getting the pollen from it. Yeah, those little details. That's what draws me in. And the fact that it's all unique and different. Each single one is never gonna be the same as another. I can't get enough of it.
Sounds like it's a very kinesthetic, multisensory process for you when you create anything. It also sounds like it's pretty intuitive too in terms of what you're drawn to.
Yeah, it is. You're right. It's very intuitive. I find so much peace in it that, when I go on vacation, half my bag is my watercolor supplies because I love wherever we are just to sit and have my coffee in the morning and paint. If I'm gonna experience real relaxation on a vacation, I'm actually working a lot of the time on painting because it brings me that relaxing experience to focus on those little details and bring them to life.
Yeah, I don't think being an artist is a 9 to 5 job. When you see something that's going to inspire you, it doesn't matter what time of day of the week it is, you're just going to run with it.
Yeah, you're right. That was in The Creative Act, the book, The Creative Act. He talks about that a lot. And he's in the music industry more, but he talks about how anybody who's an artist really needs to follow that inspiration and take it all the way to the end, no matter what. That right there goes to the heart of why for so many years I didn't, because as the mom in the house, as the person who's taking care of all the details of life, especially when my children were younger, it's hard to say, "I'm not making dinner right now because I'm in the middle of something." Like, if there's nobody else to make dinner or to go pick them up from swim lessons, everything does have to stop. And one beautiful part of watercolor is that it really can you can take breaks and come back to it later, and so I've been able to continue to pursue it even while meeting all the other demands of my life, but the biggest thing I learned in the last 5 years was how to prioritize that time for myself, how to say, "Yes, this has to happen and that has to happen, but also the time for me has to happen. I have to set these hours aside where I can pursue my art or my writing and be uninterrupted." And somebody else has got to help pick up the slack so that I can do that because it's what I've been created on this earth to do. I'm more certain of that than anything now.
Yeah, and it seems like you have found your calling for sure. And, yeah, I mean, you look back and when you were experiencing, the significant losses in your life, I mean, you were grounded in the experience of grief and obviously grounded in being the experience of a mom and taking care of your kids. So I think when we get so grounded in the day-to-day stuff, our intuition and our creativity kind of becomes dormant for a while because we're just focusing on getting through the day-to-day of everyday life.
You're absolutely right, and I don't regret any of it. It was hard, for example, when my dad was in the hospital for 4 months to go every single day and talk to the doctors and be there, but that's 4 months I wouldn't trade for anything else because I got that time with him
Mhm.
before he was gone, and same with my children. We have such a really close relationship because I've been there through all these different stages, and they know that they can talk to me about anything, and when they need me, I'll show up, so I'm so grateful for that, but if there's anything I would want your listeners to take away from this conversation, it's that finding ways to get that little bit of peace and keep your own spirit alive, even in the midst of really difficult circumstances, is so important because
Yeah.
it's your oxygen mask. You got to put it on first. If you can't take care of yourself, you'll burn out and you'll eventually not be able to serve those around you very well either. So, whatever it is, take that walk, go to therapy, or sit down and paint for 15 minutes. I do journal paintings every single day. I do journal writing every single day. Those are just part of my daily practice now. And I have found that even on the days that I can't do anything else, by making sure that I have that small amount of time, 15 minutes of journal, 15 minutes of painting, it makes the world of difference that I know that I showed up for myself that day and I gave myself that time to create and express. So do something for yourself.
If you can't take care of your spirit, you can't take care of anybody else's spirit. The other thing you mentioned about journal writing, and for me, I think journal writing and art goes hand in hand because a
Absolutely.
colleague of mine was a collage artist, and we talked about the importance of a really good artist statement to draw the person into that piece of art. I think typically if it's a little bit more personal, a little bit more intimate, less technical, I think it really appeals to individuals from a humanistic standpoint. So for me, I think journal writing in the creative arts, whether it's watercolor, oil-based painting, collage work, anything, I think that goes hand in hand. I think it's key to an artist's success, at least commercially.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, Julia Cameron says in The Artist Way that 3 pages of journal writing is key to her being able to create anything at all. And I absolutely learned from that that my journals, for the most part, it's a lot of just downloading of all the nonsense that's running around in my brain. When I wake up in the morning, I have so many things running around, and to be able to put it on a page literally gives it a place to exist instead of in my head, so that my head is free then to be creative. And if I don't take the time to do that, everything else suffers. So I definitely encourage journal writing, even if some people I know, they journal write just on like a legal pad and then they rip it up and throw it away because they don't want anybody to ever read it. That's fine. You're still giving yourself the process of getting it out of your head. And that's a very valuable thing to do.
Yeah, anytime we can get out of our head, and just put what we're thinking on paper, or even, I tell individuals, if you don't want to sit down and write, go old school. Get a micro recorder. There's
Yeah.
plenty of recording apps on your phone. You can record your thoughts there, but just get it out. Don't let it fester. And plus, getting that out may be a key. You might come up with something that's going to, it's going to inspire your creative muse, whether it's writing or art or
Yes.
anything else. So you just never know.
I completely agree. I use the Notes app all the time on my phone when I'm on my walks as well, because it's inevitable. You get inspired in the shower, you get inspired on a walk. You have to be moving and doing something else to get inspired. And so I'll pull it out and I will do speak to text to just get an idea I have for a scene or a dialogue out. And then I have it there. And it's so wonderful. I also have used the exact same thing, speak to text into the Notes app, to get all of my angry, pissed off feelings about something or some situation, someone out into a place, because I think that it is the reason that I don't say the nuclear bomb thing that I would want to say to somebody sometimes, because you just need to get it out. You just need to verbalize it or express it in some way, and then you don't ever have to actually say it. I am not non-confrontational, but there are times in this world where you don't need to say all the things, but sometimes you still need to express them. And that Notes app is really helpful for that.
Well, especially when there's a lot of emotion attached to any interaction, you can't take anything back that you've said in anger. Um,
Exactly.
I also tell my students, if you're going to send an email and it's emotionally charged, sit on it for a day, go back, read it, and ask yourself, is this the email you want to send, or do you
Yeah.
want to revise it? Because typically, when you give yourself permission to walk away from a volatile situation, your cooler heads are going to prevail. You can
Yeah.
go back and look at that and say, boy, I'm glad I didn't send that. Let me revise the message in a way that gets my point across without the emotion that's going to contribute to the person thinking this is a pretty subjective email that I've just sent. Let me stick to fact. Let me stick in terms of what my concerns are and take the
Yeah.
emotion out of it. But if you react rather than be proactive, you're going to lose a lot of friends. You might also lose a job or two in the process.
Yeah, I think it's the amygdala, right? When you get hijacked by your amygdala, when those big emotions. Our daughters both play basketball, and the coach had a policy that I think was really worthwhile. She always said, "You're entitled to have your feelings about how the game went, who was played or wasn't played. You're entitled to voice those feelings to me, but there's going to be a 24-hour grace period first. You're going to wait until 24 hours after the game before you're going to come at me. Do not show up at me or a ref or anybody else as soon as the game has ended because you're mad, because it's not going to go well for any of us."
No.
I think that that was a really good policy, because too many people get really wrapped up in those emotions and they make the whole world they act like the whole world pivots on what happened in this one moment. And when you've had 24 hours to breathe and you get sleep and you eat something, you have a glass of water or a glass of wine, whatever it is, you might find that that is actually not the case. And you can come at it with a little bit more reasonable perspective.
Yeah, that is a really good policy. It models delayed gratification and also encourages rational problem solving and also stepping back and reflecting on the situation. So I found this phrase on your website. I'm just going to throw it out at you and just tell me the first thing that comes to your head. It's all about perspective.
Yes. It is all about perspective, which is what I was just saying. The story, I put that on my website because it's a big part of Stacy's story in the book Absorbed that I published. But really, it's something that I've learned in life as well. And, we say all the time, experience what it's like to walk in somebody else's shoes for a little while, right? It's sometimes very easy when we're stuck in our head, when we're stuck in our own life, we're frustrated, or we could be on cloud nine about all of the wonderful things that are going on with us, and it makes us blind to the experience of anybody else. And so when you can take a moment and really look at things from another perspective, it can change your entire worldview. And that's so important in art, obviously. It is also really important for teenagers to learn. So it's a part of my book, and it's basically a life perspective or a life motto that I have. I try very hard. I would say when I was a teenager, my stepfather referred to me as a bleeding heart because I was overly empathetic. And so I think I do understand a lot of what they're going through, but really learning to look at things from their perspective, the nuanced perspective, not just in regards to this one situation, has really enabled me to, I think, be a better daughter, be a better wife, be a better friend, be a better mother, and be a better writer because I can write my characters from very nuanced perspectives in their own lives and help them to relate to one another in better ways as well, because I can take those different perspectives on. So yeah, it's definitely a life motto of mine.
Well, I got another task for you. Watercolor
Yes.
tie-dye t-shirt that says it's all about perspective.
Oh, I definitely could do something like that. I have stickers that are available that I've made with my watercolor art. It's all about perspective that are available. But I think sharing that motto more often is always going to be a good thing. So t-shirt, note cards, anything.
Well, if you do a tie-dye watercolor t-shirt with it's all about perspective and like a neon lettering, send me a text and I'll be the first one to order.
Oh, good to know. All right. You got it, Dave. I'll send one as a gift, just as a thank you for you having me on the show.
It's been a great conversation, and I have a couple more questions for you. And then
Yeah, of course.
first of all, you're going to leave our listeners with one thing today, just one ultimate takeaway. And trust me, you've left us with a lot about the creative process, how it helps us to transcend challenge, just the pure joy of creation. But beyond all of that, what is your one ultimate takeaway for today?
I think if you remember anything about me and my story, I hope that you see that everything, whether it's a watercolor, whether it's a scary situation a teenager's in, whether it's a real life moment of grief, everything has light and dark. Everything has shadows. The shadows actually make everything deeper and richer and more well-rounded and beautiful. And so we can't live a life of just light because then we wouldn't see the beauty and the richness and the depth in what's around us. So yeah, if you're going to remember anything about me and my story and any part of this conversation, I hope you remember that the shadows need to be embraced, that I've embraced the shadows by choosing to pursue these arts. I'm embracing those shadows. My life didn't stop being hard. People didn't stop dying. We didn't stop having difficult circumstances. I just learned how to embrace them and involve them in my life and also pursue the light, the joy in these other avenues. So it's not about avoiding the shadows, it's not about avoiding the darkness and the hard times. It's about embracing them. They really make our life richer and more beautiful.
Yeah, I agree. And I think within the shadows are so many life lessons and opportunities for growth that
Hmm.
to not embrace those opportunities, I think we deny a good part of our existence, and it
Yeah.
could be our past existence and certainly present and perhaps future existence. Embrace the shadows because that's going to be the gateway to growth for us.
Absolutely right. Yeah. And some of the most beautiful moments I've had have been on those hardest days, right? But if I hadn't shown up, if I had run away from them, I wouldn't have those moments that I can cherish forever. You got to show up and you do it, but also the light and the dark. You need both. It's all a balance.
Yeah, absolutely. We can embrace spiritual awareness through, those light moments, through those happy moments, those, aha moments, but we can
Yeah.
also embrace spiritual awareness through the not so nice moments, the darkest moments that we can learn from as well too. And it's the yin and the yang of our existence. It's necessary to who we are.
It really
Thank
is. Yeah. You're right. The yin and the yang. It's exactly it. I think being human is about the balance of both.
Mhm.
You can't live in just one part of it. Too often, addiction is about trying to pursue only this one thing that brings joy or a belief of relief.
Mhm.
And the reality is, by doing that, everything else goes out of balance and you can't pursue one thing exclusively. Even if I pursued only watercolor all day, every day, my life would be very shallow because I wouldn't have these deep relationships with the people I love. So, yeah, it's all about balance.
Agreed. My last question for you, this will give you an opportunity to promote yourself a little bit. If people want to purchase your art, commission you for a piece of art, purchase your book, what's the best way for them to do that, Jamie?
Well, you can find everything on jaimetowzen.com, which I'm sure will be in the show notes, along with all of my like Instagram and Facebook, Jaime Townzen or Jamie Gets Creative on all the different pages, everything. But also the book is available anywhere. You can buy books online, like Amazon, like Barnes and Noble. You can get it on Audible, and I love anybody who wants to pursue any of those things, but I'm a big advocate of small town libraries and independently owned bookstores. So I really encourage you to just go in and request Absorbed by Jaime Townzen from your library or a bookstore, and they can order it for you. And that helps them and me. The more of that happens, the more grateful I am. So please look for it that way. In terms of my art, that is on jaimetowzen.com. And there's a lot of different stuff available there. So you can shoot me a message if there's something that you're really interested in.
Yeah, I've looked at your website and there's some really great stuff. Jamie's a very talented artist. I would encourage all of my audience to, even if you're not prone to the creative arts, check out her work. It's vivid, it's vibrant, it comes alive when you look at it, and it speaks to all of the elements that I think most people can relate to: nature, animals. I think it's great. So, Jamie, thank you so much for a wonderful conversation today. I truly enjoyed it. And maybe we can do this again sometime.
I'd like that so much, Dave. Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed the multiple conversations we've had, and I'm just so grateful for what you're doing through your show. So thanks for letting me be a part of that.
You're anytime. And with that, that's a wrap on another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, wishing you peace.